Hello, my name is Edward Melendez. This presentation introduces the Romantic Relationship Rejection Sensitivity Scale, or RRSS. The RRSS is a brief scenario-based measure designed to assess rejection sensitivity in adult romantic contexts. The goal is not to diagnose anyone, but to measure a relationship relevant tendency that can shape how people interpret and react to ambiguous partner behavior. In this presentation, I'm introducing the RRSS as a brief measure of romantic rejection sensitivity and why it matters for romantic functioning. I'll explain the construct, the reasoning behind using ambiguous scenarios, and how the RRSS is designed and scored. I'll also describe the administration and ethical considerations, and then I'll outline a clear plan for establishing reliability and validity so the test can be interpreted responsibly. Romantic rejection sensitivity is the tendency to anxiously expect rejection from a romantic partner and to interpret ambiguous partner behavior as rejection. This construct includes two key components: concern or anxiety about possible rejection and expectancy that rejection will happen rather than acceptance. The reason that two-component structure matters is that someone can feel worried about not expect rejection or expect rejection without feeling highly anxious, and those patterns could have different implications for how they behave in relationships. Rejection sensitivity matters because it is associated with poorer romantic outcomes, including lower relationship satisfaction. It can also contribute to self-perpetuating cycles in relationships where anxious expectations influence how people interpret events and how they behave over time. For example, a person might interpret a delayed reply as rejection, respond defensively, and then unintentionally create tension that increases actual distance. Recent replication and extension work also connects rejection sensitivity to young adults' romantic relationship functioning, which supports the importance of measuring it clearly in romantic contexts. One pathway that helps explain these outcomes is the rejection hostility process. When someone perceives rejection, it can trigger hostility and worsen interaction quality in romantic relationships. What makes this important is that a trigger can be ambiguous, meaning the partner might not intend rejection at all, but the test taker experiences it anyway. Over time, repeated moments like this can create a pattern where conflict escalates faster, repair becomes harder, and both partners might feel less emotionally safe. Rejection sensitivity is supported as a measurable process because it shows up in cognitive and biological findings. Research links rejection sensitivity to disruption of attention by social threat cues, meaning social threatening information can pull attention away from what the person is trying to do. In a relationship context, that helps explain why a person might fixate on one uncertain cue. Like a short text message and thread, it is highly meaningful. Neuro research also suggests that rejection sensitivity is related to differences in how the brain processes rejection-related cues. Together, these findings support the idea that rejection sensitivity involves a consistent pattern of threat processing, not just temporary mood. This test is a brief scenario-based self-report measure designed for adult romantic contexts. It uses scenarios where rejection is plausible and partner intent is ambiguous because ambiguity is what activates rejection sensitivity processes. A big advantage of scenarios is that they place people in the same standardized situation. So the test is not just measuring whatever is happening in the relationship that day. The planned length is about 10 to 12 scenarios, and the final number will be refined during piloting based on clarity, reliability, and item performance. Each scenario includes two Likert ratings, one rating for concern or anxiety, and one rating for expectancy of acceptance. This dual response structure matches established rejection sensitivity measurement principles. Conceptually, the concern rating captures the emotional reaction, and the expectancy rating captures the belief about what will happen. Likert scaling also supports standardized scoring and makes administration practical in both clinical screening and research settings. Also, using a 6-point scale can also reduce excessive midpoint responding and push respondents to lean one direction or other. Items will be drafted from common romantic situations involving ambiguity, such as delayed replies, distancing, conflict repair, and commitment discussions. The focus is on scenarios that many adults can imagine regardless of relationship style, so the content is broadly applicable. Expert review will be used to ensure the scenarios reflect romantic rejection sensitivity rather than jealousy or general dissatisfaction, because those are related but different constructs. Then, pilot testing will be used to revise wording and remove items that do not perform well psychometrically. For example, if an item is confusing, too cultural specific, or doesn't relate well to the total score, it may need to be revised or replaced. For scoring, expectancy of acceptance ratings are a reverse score to represent expectancy of rejection. Each scenario score is calculated by multiplying the concern or anxiety rating by the reverse expectancy of rejection rating. The total RRSS score is the average of all scenario scores, and higher scores indicate higher romantic rejection sensitivity. This scoring method matters because it reflects the idea that rejection sensitivity is strongest when both components are high at the same time. So the test is not just measuring anxiety, and it's not measuring pessimism. It's measuring the combination of emotional concern and rejection expectancy under ambiguity. Test takers respond based on how they would typically feel and what they would expect in a current or recent romantic relationship. The instructions should emphasize typical reactions rather than what they think they should feel, because that reduces socially desirable responding. Distractions and situational stress might affect responses, so administration should occur in a quiet setting with minimal interruption. Administrators should also remain neutral to avoid influencing how test takers interpret ambiguous scenarios, because even small cues from an administrator could lead a person to reinterpret an item. If the test is administered in research, consistent instructions and timing should be used for all participants. This test is not diagnostic and should not be used to label individuals as toxic or unfit for relationships. Ethical administration requires confidentiality and careful feedback to avoid shame-based interpretations of scores. One ethical risk is that people may treat a high score as proof that rejection is happening when the test is really measuring a tendency to perceive rejection under ambiguity. Results should be framed as a pattern that can be understood and improved. For example, through insight, communication skills, emotion regulation strategies, or therapy when needed. The RRSS should also be interpreted within context, including cultural norms and relationship circumstances. Standardization begins with pilot testing to evaluate item distributions and item total performance to refine the RRSS item set. This stage helps identify items with floor or ceiling effects, unclear wording, or weak relationships with the overall construct. Then, a larger diverse sample will be used to develop preliminary norms such as means, standard deviations, and percentiles for interpretation. This matters because cross-cultural evidence suggests that romantic norms around communication, conflict, and emotional expression vary, which could influence what people perceive as rejection. Including diverse groups also allows evaluation of whether items function similarly across demographics, which is important for fairness. Reliability will be evaluated in three main ways. First, internal consistency reliability will be examined using measures such as alpha and omega if available. Internal consistency answers the question, do the items hang together as a coherent measure of romantic rejection sensitivity? If internal consistency is low, it may indicate that some scenarios are not measuring the same underlying tendency or that wording is confusing. Second, test retest reliability will be tested by re-administering the test after about 2 weeks to assess stability. The reason for a 2 week window is that it is long enough to reduce memory effects, but short enough that the underlying trait should not drastically change. This provides evidence that the RRSS is measuring a stable tendency rather than a temporary emotional state. Third, item analysis such as item total correlations will guide revisions to improve score consistency. Items with weak item total correlations or poor distributions will be revised or removed. The overall goal is to produce a measure where the total score is dependable enough that score differences reflect real differences between people rather than measuring error. Validity evidence will be established in multiple ways. First, content validity will be supported through expert review to confirm that scenarios represent romantic rejection sensitivity specifically. This step ensures the measure covers the construct appropriately and doesn't drift into related concepts like jealousy, attachment anxiety, or general relationship dissatisfaction. Second, construct validity will be tested using factor analysis and by examining expected associations with related constructs and relationship outcomes. For example, RRSS scores should relate to patterns like negative interpretations of ambiguous cues and maladaptive responses during conflict, but it should not simply duplicate measures of depression or general anxiety. Construct validity is basically asking, is the RRSS behaving the way rejection sensitivity theory predicts? Third, criterion validity will be evaluated by testing whether RRSS scores predict outcomes consistent with rejection sensitivity theory, such as hostility after perceived rejection, relationship strain, or lower satisfaction. A strong measure should show meaningful links to relevant relationship outcomes while still remaining specific to the construct. Here are sample RRSS items. These scenarios are designed to be realistic and ambiguous, so the test taker must interpret partner intent. After each scenario, the test taker answers two 1 to 6 ratings, one for concern or anxiety, and one for expectancy of acceptance. One is very unlikely, and 6 is very likely. Some examples include a delayed reply to an emotional message, cancel plans with the partner later seen active online, an affection shift where the partner says nothing is wrong, and public distance at a social event. Each scenario will be followed by the two response rating for concern and expectancy. The scenario-based format is adapted from established rejection sensitivity methodology, but the specific scenarios are tailored to modern adult romantic contexts. Some other examples include conflict repair after an argument, an intimacy bid that is declined, and future talk where the partner quickly changes the subject. These items are intentionally common and not extreme because the goal is to capture how people respond to everyday ambiguity rather than obvious rejection. Across items, the RRSS is trying to measure a stable tendency that shows up in different types of romantic situations. In interpretation, higher RRSS scores indicate a greater tendency to interpret ambiguous partner cues as rejection and respond with distress. This may show up in behaviors like reassurance seeking, withdrawal, overthinking, or escalation during conflict. Lower scores suggest a person is less likely to perceive rejection when cues are unclear and may remain more emotionally regulated in uncertain situations. Scores should be interpreted using norms and contextual factors rather than rigid categories. In practice, the RRSS should be used as one piece of information alongside interviews, relationship history, and the client's current circumstances. This test has potential benefits and potential harms. A benefit is that it might help identify a measurable and modifiable risk process linked to poorer romantic functioning and relationship distress. If a clinician sees high RRSS scores, it could guide interventions focused on interpretation bias, emotion regulation, and communication patterns. A potential harm is misuse. For example, labeling the test taker or treating the score as proof that a partner is rejecting them. Ethical safeguards include careful feedback, confidentiality, and emphasizing that the RRSS reflects tendencies under ambiguity rather than certainty. To summarize, the RRSS measures romantic rejection sensitivity using ambiguous romantic scenarios and dual ratings for concern and expectancy. The scoring approach captures the combination of emotional concern and rejection expectancy, which is central to rejection sensitivity theory. Reliability will be supported through internal consistency and test-retest stability, and validity will be supported through content, construct, and criterion evidence linked to romantic relationship outcomes. Overall, the RRSS is designed as a practical tool for research and clinical contexts where understanding rejection-related risk patterns is useful. These last two slides list the research articles used to support the RRSS design and the reliability and validity plan. Thank you for listening.